Ben Riggs presents D&D Out Loud, episode 103. Is this game a hoax?
Welcome to D&D Out Loud with Ben Riggs. I am Ben Riggs, apparently controversial D&D historian and author of Slaying the Dragon, A Secret History of Dungeons & Dragons. And over the past 13 years of writing and podcasting, I have met hundreds of creative geniuses in and around the world of tabletop role-playing games. Here on this show, I ask two of these flaming torches of the human imagination to come forth and have a fascinating discussion, which I then record and send forth into the world. First up, we have fellow D&D historian Michael Calleia. For years, Dave Arneson and Gary Gygax hinted that they could not speak freely about the creation of D&D for legal reasons. Michael followed up on these hints, searching archives and court documents all across the United States until he found a gem in Chicago, the July 1973 draft of Dungeons & Dragons. He is a master researcher and has been kind enough to share some of his gems with me. Michael, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you.
Next up, we have game designer Amabel Holland. Her LinkedIn describes her as, quote, I design weird angry board games for a living and am extremely trash online, end quote. This is just the beginning. It gets more embarrassing. She is also arguably the game designer with the greatest clippings in America, since the New Yorker did a 4,000-word profile of her 3 years ago. She works at Holland Spiel, where her title is, and I quote, Games Weirdo. She is also the second former librarian turned game designer from Michigan I have had on in the past 2 weeks, which is pretty weird. I don't know what's wrong with libraries in Michigan that everyone leaves to become a game designer, but I guess you do.
They're underfunded.
Amabel is here because Michael was quite taken by one of her recent games, and I am going to read you what is on the website described as the back of the box text. It is 600 words of back of the box text, but I feel like it's important to get it all out here to let the audience understand why Amabel is here and why Michael was intrigued. So, quote, the reverse of the original box was blank, so I hope you don't mind me filling up the space with some context. In 2016, a few days after we had started Hollenspiel, Mary and I went to an estate sale and came across this box. I had never heard of it before, but I assumed, based on the title, it might have something to do with the Lankmar series of books, or that based on the repurposed J.R. Skelton illustration, it might have something to do with Beowulf. Both of these were things I was fairly obsessed with at the time, so I gave $10 to the daughter of the deceased. And the title on the front is Swords Against, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, and it has a heroic, vaguely fantasy, historical-looking illustration on the cover.
Yes, it has a illustration for Beowulf for Children from like 1910.
Cool. I will continue with the back of the box. Quote, the box had been sealed with heavy strapping tape. When I cut it open, I found it mostly contained the previous owner's personal effects. The core rulebook was missing, as was the Dictionary of Devils. The only piece of the original game left in the box was the adventure module, but not its dungeon map or the answer key for its many obtuse puzzles. The game was unplayable. I went online to try and find PDFs of the missing material, but there were none. No downloads on DriveThruRPG, no entries in databases, no forums, no remembrances on groggy blogs. It was almost as if it never existed at all. But the box was proof it did. And in those personal effects, there were a few clues that enabled me to piece together the story of an RPG publisher that existed for a few months in 1979, and the novelist who wrote an adventure that in all likelihood was played by maybe a dozen people. More than that, I learned about the person who had owned my copy and had annotated the module with a puzzle of their own. The box was proof that they existed too. It occurred to me that all of this was worth preserving, and a few years ago I set about securing the necessary permissions to publish this replica edition. The original publisher, Michael Lord, was still alive. He passed only very recently, and even sent me a copy of the missing materials. I went back and forth on whether or not to include them, but ultimately felt I wanted to preserve the experience and existence of this specific copy. W.T. Schaus's partner was quite gracious and helped me put the vanishing of Surlow's Keep into the wider context of the late author's work and life. Jennifer Keaton was resistant to the inclusion of the personal effects, but changed her mind when she opened the sealed envelope containing an unsent letter her parent had written to Schaus. With her kind permission, that letter too has been reproduced, but she asks that you do not open it. Best, Amabel Holland. And I feel like I have to keep reading this, even though it seems like irrelevancies. This production was made possible due to the generous participation of Sam Hain-Bones, Scott Boltman, and David McCord of New Venture Games, Dr. Liz Davidson, Aaron Escobedo, Mary Holland, Jennifer Keaton, Sarah Lilycove, Michael Lord, Samantha Lord, and Elaine Zingerman, and the W.T. Schaus archive. Excerpt from Gunfighter of the Black Sea, 1971 printing, appears courtesy of Elaine Zingerman, the W.T. Schaus archive, and Best Bauer books, and then you give us the contents in chronological order, which I will also endeavor to read. I think it's important. I mean, maybe,
but it's so embarrassing just to sit here and listen to someone read my writing.
I mean, welcome to my fresh hell. I hear you. Like, there's nothing more embarrassing than anyone reading your writing aloud. But I feel like Michael, would you agree with me that this is a part of the key to why you were intrigued?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, here's the module with no map. The funny thing is, when I first read that, I was literally in the middle of reading what is probably a typewritten from 1971, 72, the first ever party dungeon delve after a game report, and mapping it out, because the map in First Fantasy Campaign does not quite match what's there. So realizing the published map in 1977 is not quite the same as the map that they actually used in playing in 1972, and going, oh my gosh, and having to like map it out. And then I'm reading about this game, I'm like, I feel seen, and like, you just created a game that like every RPG historian is like living.
Could you tell us what First Fantasy Campaign is to contextualize that for audience that might not know?
Yeah, so First Fantasy Campaign came out. It was Dave Arneson's notes that may or may not be the notes that were some of the rejected things that were meant to go into the Blackmore supplement for original D&D, and they were published by Judges Guild, and they're a collection again of Arneson's notes, background on Blackmore, actual maps of Blackmore, although the first few levels were redrawn and restocked for convention games. And then there are other, and then it goes on to lower levels, which had the original stocking, but being written just 4 or 5 years later, Arneson was like, I think I did this. And like, here's the guy who did it. And like, that's why it's amazing asking these folks like all these questions. What they actually remember decades later is amazing. But sometimes they have to go and recreate and figure out, reverse engineer what they did.
Because you interview the people that were in Arneson's First Fantasy Campaign, right?
Yeah.
And arguably it's the first game of Dungeons and Dragons ever played, although it gets complicated and people from Minnesota might get angry that I said that. So we're just going to leave that lie. So you're literally looking at what he wrote and then published, and then you're looking at his notes and you're saying, hey, there's differences here, there's things missing, and then you come across Amabel's replica, shall we say, and you're like, this is the game of my life.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, this is my other pastime, yeah. Playing games and then also researching that game or other games, yeah.
Playing and researching is a big part of my life now, because what I've done a lot lately is I've been researching board game designers of the 20th century, because there are about 10,000 board games published in the 20th century where they never credited the person who designed it. And that's something that you have within the board game space now in the hobby market, still not so much in the mass market. And a lot of those people, they're dying. And I got to find the information. I got to do it now. And I've been very lucky to track down the designers for about 80 board games.
Wow.
And very seldom are they still alive. Very seldom is there more than just a name or a little biographical sketch. But I feel like that history is very much worth preserving. And so it's really fascinating that you're able to track down people who were there, because this is things happening 50 plus years ago. That's really cool.
Well, it's yeah, and it can be there are times when going through one list, it was going through and finding okay, this one passed, this one's alive. And there have been times when I've actually in the middle of trying to schedule an interview or trying to get across who I am and why it's okay to talk to me, they pass, like while exchanging emails. That's happened at least twice. So it's important, I think, to talk to these folks and capture what they have to say and find out what their experiences were back in the day. And again, there's a lot that they don't remember, but there's like, if I had their memory at their age, I'll be a very happy person.
Yeah, exactly. I had an interview I did with Renee Soriano, who is a board game designer. He's 95, just turned 96 years old, and he is so sharp. And I hope I am that sharp at that age.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I've seen your YouTube channel. So it's uncredited searching for lost board game designers, right? Or at least that series.
That's one of the that's one of the videos.
Yeah, which is pretty amazing.
Thank you. That's very kind. It's been, so you've gone to Ben said you've gone to archives, and can I hear about that?
Give away my secrets. So there's, well, actually, I mean, a lot of the information is sitting out there in archives. So there's two big ones for especially RPGs and also gaming in general. One is the Strong Museum of Play, which has a ton of stuff, and that seems to be generally they have the gravitational pull that a lot of the donations are going to them lately. There's another that was actually the source for John Peterson's Playing at the World. A lot of the material that he had, I mean, at the time when he was writing it, a lot of the zines were a lot cheaper than they are today, and so he was able to acquire quite a few, but he didn't have to acquire all that. I don't know how many he actually acquired, but there was a source at Bowling Green University, which has an amazing archive. There's I think it's the Brown Popular Culture collection, and inside that is the Walt Buchanan, the Hoosier archives. And Walt Buchanan was a diplomacy player, and he wrote to the two big diplomacy zine people at the time, Rod Walker and John Boardman, who apparently was a Brooklynite and not too far from here. And they were like, well, why don't you, he was like, what can I do? What could be my contribution to diplomacy? And they were like, why don't you start an archive? So he did, and he started collecting all the zines, basically all of them, and created this giant archive. He even, there are 3 copies of the Catholic Crusade Society's Doomsday Book in their archive. Wow. Which were sent by Gary Gygax. They have Gary's name written on the cover, and they also have the correspondence from Gary including like, here they are, Walt. Oh, by the way, could you return them and pay the postage, send them back? I'm like really not in a good place right now because I lost my job and yada yada, which he did, you know, and so Walt never sent them back is the short story, and they're in the archive now. So they have all this amazing stuff there. They even had a copy of the first level of the key for the first level of Greyhawk Dungeon, which TSR in I can't remember if it was Origin 1 or Origin 2. I think it was Origin 2. They ran a seminar, and part of it included this key that was like, what is D&D, and then a key to the map, and they actually had the map behind them. Unfortunately, there's no copy of the map that went with it. Which again, here's a key with no map. And then I had to sit there and like redraw the map based on the key. So again,
can I footnote that really quick? Can I footnote that for a second, Michael?
Yeah.
So again, if people don't know, Playing at the World was an early seminal history of D&D, which has been revised into a magisterial second edition. And diplomacy, if you obviously, Amabel, you know diplomacy, but for listeners,
right.
I mean, diplomacy is probably where our roots meet, because it was I'm going to call it a World War I simulation, although that's not entirely accurate. John F. Kennedy, there were rumors that John F. Kennedy said it was his favorite board game. You played one of the powers in World War I in a bitter struggle over Europe. And it was also a game where you had to really talk to other players in order to move your armies across the map. But Gary Gygax played a ton of diplomacy. There was a huge diplomacy fanzine ecosystem back in the day. And a lot of the networking from diplomacy influenced early D&D, and a lot of ideas from diplomacy made their way into. I guess that's fair to. I don't know if it's fair to say or not. I'll stop talking about that because it's not my area of expertise. But diplomacy is where board games and role playing games meet in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, I'd agree. There's some crossover for sure, and the Twisty guys also were playing quite a bit. They had their own zine, and so that may have influenced some of their later games, especially when they did their big Napoleonics campaign, which definitely crossed over into role playing.
Are you willing to talk at all about looking for materials in lawsuits?
Sure. I mean, there are lots of them sitting around again in archives. That one can be a real heartbreaker too, as you know. You can find, so a lot of them. Let me back up. One way I usually describe this is, you can look up like someone's great grandparent in the US in like records, their own county records. They're always like old, things going back to the 1800s, all preserved. But somewhere around like the 70s to now, a lot of that stuff just gets tossed. And there are, retention, retention deadlines, retention policies cause that, really. And so once certain records, including court records, reach that time period, then they generally get tossed, just totally destroyed, not even transferred over to microfilm. And if it's a really important case, including if it's a federal case, it's a really important one, then it'll get preserved. Luckily, the Arneson TSR cases were preserved for whatever reason, and they ended up moved to out of the court records to an archive, a national archive. Some of the others were still at the county level, and you have to go and find them and get all kinds of weird numbers and contact the county clerk and get those. But others are just gone. So the TSR Gary Gygax case in '85 is lost, and Ben knows this because it's like, I think we missed it by like a week or month or something, like really close. And it was like, Yeah, we just tossed that.
I want to say I went and looked in 2016, 2017, and I think it was tossed in 2015. If I'm thinking correctly in about the courthouse in Elkhorn, Wisconsin. But now we are far down the rabbit hole now, Amabel. But like if you went and poked around for various lawsuits, you never know what you're going to find. So things might pop up. So if you're doing board game research, go and hunt down where there was a lawsuit. See if you can get to that courthouse and see what they have left. The thing that really sucks, in my opinion, is they make you photocopy it, and it's like 80 cents a page to get the records, which is fine, but they tend to go on.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, when I first found the D&D draft, it was still they were still charging, and then funny enough, when I wrote a blog post saying, "Hey, here's where you can get it, and here's how to get it, and they'll probably charge you," then it turned out that they had actually put it on their website, on the archives website, and it's like, "Here it is for free," and I was like, "Oh, okay, go get it."
Yeah, no, it can certainly be. It can be expensive to try to get a hold of documents. I got a hold of all the annual reports from the Ideal Toy Company, and I had to get that through a university archive in Canada, and it was like they scanned it all in for me. It was like $1 a page, and it was quite a bit of money. But luckily, because I have the Patreon for my videos, that basically just funds the research. That's basically what I use it for. And I really just want information to be free. I want information to be out there for people. Yeah, that's just what I have to contribute there.
So what, being a board game designer with, again, it sounds like you've read a lot of role-playing games and played some, but it's not your primary hobby. Like, I always think of comic books as my tertiary hobby. But what made you want to go and make a replica of a game that you found at a garage sale over 10 years ago?
Well, there were a few things that were the genesis for this project. And one is my interest in the process of dealing with an object or artifact where you don't have the full context, and the experience of that, the experience of dealing with something that was clearly owned by someone else. One of the things I have in my book collection, which I don't have with me right now, but because I have like 2,000-3,000 books that I got at book sales. It was great. They'd have a bag day. You fill up a bag for $5. And I got a copy of the book "What Is Cinema" by André Bazin, very influential French mucky muck. And the copy of the book is annotated. Like there's underlines, little arguments in it, and there's a name on the front cover, on the inside front cover, a name and an address. And that name was Andrew Sarris, and that was the address. And he was, for quite some time, like a very influential American film critic. Basically, is mostly held responsible for bringing a version of auteur theory to America. And so I don't know if I have his book or not. It's the same handwriting. I don't know why someone would write his name and address and then it wasn't him. But owning that book that someone else owned and seeing their thought process is something that I think is really, fascinating. And so the idea of kind of constructing a game that is presented as an incomplete replica to recreate that experience is something that just appealed to me. And so I thought, oh, that's a neat idea. Some people are going to hate this, but some people will love it, because I think a large part of my work is asking like, what is a game? What is play? And I know that's like a very kind of it's a very familiar question in the RPG space. It's not asked very much in the board game space, as much as I'd like. We board games have never really had the Forge for better or worse. So and so the idea of having a thing where like maybe this is a game, maybe it's not, maybe is interacting with these physical objects. Is that a board game? And then beyond that, I also just had when you work in board games, you're not usually working with narrative, and you're very seldom working with emotion. You can get at it, but it's a little difficult. It's not like the primary texture of the thing, whereas basically every other kind of game can do it more readily. And so having, I guess, some frustrated narrative ambitions, some kind of that kind of contributed. My partner Samhain plays a lot of video games. It's what she does for a living. She's a professional video games YouTuber. Like that's a job someone's allowed to have. And she plays a lot of these games that kind of take the form of like document archives and whatnot. And I thought, oh, these are neat. And how would you do that in the board game space where you can't gate someone's progress? I have that envelope that's sealed with that letter, and it is a thing of import. But do you open it or not? I don't know if the person playing it is going to open it or follow the instructions to not open it. But I feel like by stamping "do not open" on the envelope, at the very least, it's probably not the first thing they open. So in that way, I'm able to kind of gate the information. So that's all those things together kind of came together, and then just also wanting to do something that I have like a deep and abiding interest in Old English. So something that and medieval Christianity, something where I could mix those two things together. It all felt quite natural for me. Did that answer the question? When people ask me questions,
wait. This isn't a real game? You didn't really like make an exact replica of a game from 2016?
Well,
this is the game. This is an experience. Like I opened the box. What?
Here's the thing. It never occurred to me anyone would not realize that, because I had some people afterwards like be like, well, how did you get to? And it's like, no, I don't think it would necessarily be possible for me to find a game and there'd be no trace of it anywhere. No one ever mentions it in any document. Now, maybe I'm wrong there. That's my experience with board games. But board games, the thing about board games is that generally, in the 20th century, they're being produced a lot of times by toy companies or by like hobbyist companies, like Avalon Hill SPI and that. Whereas my impression of RPGs, and you two can correct me on this, is that it's much more of like a small press thing than a big toy company with the means of production kind of thing.
I would just say that when I was looking at and again, I've just looked at on your website, right? But looking at it, and one of the reasons I want to read as much of the 600 words from the website as I could was because the first thing it evoked for me was Lovecraft. And the old racist from Rhode Island said something like, if you want to write a horror short story, you have to approach it like you're pulling off a hoax, and you had the same thing there. Like it is a thorough and unblinking presentation of, yeah, this is the thing. I'm a games weirdo, and I just found this thing, and I own my own company, and my LinkedIn says I never have to have a real job ever again. So I'm just doing this. And you know what? Here, look, I listed all the rights. Everybody I got rights from gets a thanks at the bottom. And then below that, you have the table of content, which is where we punched out, right? When you're like, here are the actual contents of the box. Like that, again, to talk about play. Now, I think Michael told me, I'm pretty sure you told me going in, oh yeah, here it's a fake replica. So it was spoiled for me, but I am utterly unsurprised that people would read that and be like, oh, this is really freaky and weird. Wait, is this real or not? Like, it would take them a while to come to that realization, because your hoax of the replica is so extensive, thorough, and unblinking.
Well, the thing is, I'm working in a way as a sort of pastiche, and I feel like pastiche, you need to be very po-faced about it, and you need to commit to the form, and even within the objects that are being reproduced, I had to dig into like typography, and into there's a Xerox of 2 pages from an old science fiction novel, and so I got a couple of my Ace paperbacks, and I counted the lines, I counted the text, I found the fonts used, and then also just kind of wrote within a kind of, I did my best Lieber-esque writing, because I feel like getting that stuff right is important. I watch a lot of films, and sometimes a film or a TV show will do like a musical number as like a send up to old musical numbers. Well, I love old musicals, and they almost always get it wrong. Like the camera angle's wrong for the period that they're evoking, or the lighting or whatnot. The only ones to really get it right is the movie Hail Caesar, the musical number there. Perfect. It's exactly the kind of choreography and the kind of it's the right kind of song, it's the right kind of lighting and camera work. And like, if you're going to do that kind of thing, I feel like you have to do it right, and you can't like tip your hand. So I did, but it also, again, I just didn't think anyone would take it seriously. I've had people reach out to me, and I've had some people reach out to me like, tell me, oh, this is such a beautiful thing, because it's like this person that died, and you're remembering them through this, and like part of that is evoking that experience of someone who has died. But I don't really know how to react sometimes. I only once or twice I had a game a couple years ago that did quite well called City of Six Moons, which is also presented as a kind of artifact. But the story there is that I met some aliens from outer space, and they gave me their board game. And very few people have tried to treat that as serious. Some have, and it's like, someone once got me signed up for a panel. I was like, okay, I'll show up to your panel. And then they wanted to talk to me about like the aliens were real. And I was like, no, I can't do this. I can't. I could tell the little fiction within the presentation of the game to kind of let you get absorbed into that world. But I'm not gonna go and pretend I talk to aliens for an hour. That sounds like a terrible time. And yeah, I part of that box is priming the audience for the kind of thing it is, and to try to communicate a vibe, and because I wanted to create a thing that people could kind of get lost in. I don't often get that chance with board games to create a thing where I got a little taste of it with Six Moons, because there are people who spent 20, 30 hours or weeks or months with this thing trying to translate the game, because the rules are in alien language. And
the rules are in an alien language?
Yeah, it's an alien iconographic language, and you have to translate it in order to play it. And there's like a group translation project document that's online. There's someone that wrote like a session report as a weird kind of like fan fiction where there's an alien in his head, and all these people are engaging with this game in all these weird ways I've never had before, and I want more of that. So I want to create a thing that someone can get lost in and have like a lot of layers, and it'd be a kind of a time investment, which I don't usually, I try to make games that take an hour to play, and this from my play testing, from my early access people, you're looking at several hours or weeks depending on where you are, how long it takes you to dig into this stuff.
So I teach 7th and 8th grade, and I can tell you right now, I'm going to buy a copy of City of Six Moons and throw that at the 7th and 8th graders in the autumn and just be like, yeah, this is an alien game and you need to translate it. Because it will flip their lids.
And, and the weirdest thing is I did that, as this is an experiment. Let's see if there's an audience for it. And it's far and away the most popular thing I've ever done. Like, within the 2 years it's been out, it outsold my previous bestseller 3 times over, and that bestseller those are the sales for it for 10 years. So like it just I never had anything take off like this before. I feel like a real board game designer instead of like a little zine maker. I describe myself someone who makes little zines, and then I suddenly have like a game people have heard of.
I mean, again, it's interesting to be talking about what is play, because I've been obsessing about it lately. Did either of you ever read Homo Ludens? I can't pronounce the Dutch guy's name. Johan Huizinga or something like that. Sounds like a no from both of you, so that's great, actually.
I'm familiar with, because that's where the magic circle comes from.
I don't know. I've only read chapter 1.
But I
know
read the book. I don't read a lot of theory, actually. People think I'm like a big theory reading, and I'm too busy playing games and trying to make games. I think
lucky
for a
dog.
living. I gotta do it quickly.
Us historians are stuck reading. But Johan points out that play predates humanity, and because animals obviously play with each other, and humans can play with animals, and that play was probably a component in the construction of language, religion, culture, literature, storytelling, and that it is a mode of human existence that is a block of all of those things. And therefore, if you wish to change any of those things in the human world, starting in play is not a bad idea at all, because it predates them and makes them up. Therefore, if you change the play, you can change those elements. And so first of all, again, to be thinking about hoaxes as a form of play is very interesting. If because and I hope that it doesn't trip your trigger in a bad way to hear me describe this as a hoax as a form of play. But I'm guessing you've never heard of the Dracula dossier.
I don't think so.
So let me scream this into your ear, because if this is the way you're tending, and role-playing games are a tertiary interest of yours, this might be right up your alley. So Pelgrane Press, some British role-playing game company, has a spies versus vampires role-playing game called Night's Black Agents. And their grand campaign for Night's Black Agents is the Dracula dossier, wherein they suppose that the novel Dracula is a redacted after-action report of an attempt by British intelligence to recruit Dracula to be an agent of the Queen. And for the campaign, they added 50,000 words to Dracula. They then had annotations in the margins of their unredacted Dracula, but in the hands of 3 different spies, because there were 3 different attempts over the last 100 years to recruit Dracula to work for British intelligence. And they then went out and made further handouts to go along with the unredacted Dracula campaign. Like, hey, here's Van Helsing's notebook. Here is Renfield's notebook, where he keeps track of how many flies he eats. And in the original version, they actually, printed all this out, sent it to you. And it was gorgeous and amazing. But again, it reads like a hoax, right? Like, you could leave that in a subway station somewhere, and someone breaks into the suitcase containing all of this, and they're going to be like, "Oh my God, Dracula's real, and he's trying to be recruited by British." That person is going to have an amazing time. It also reminds me of discovering the Necronomicon and the Specials collection at Boston University when I was like 21 years old, and being like, "It's all real. Cthulhu's real." And again, I don't know what I'm saying or where I'm going with this, other than, perhaps the hoax is a form of play, even though, again, we tend to think of it as a bad thing, right? Like, oh, you hoax someone, that's bad, it's terrible.
Yeah.
But, there's fun there too.
The word hoax has a connotation, but like, I think presenting a work of fiction as within the form of nonfiction, I think there are ways, there are things to be gained from doing that, and there are things to, especially when you're doing something that's more metatextual, So yeah, I don't like the word hoax, but I understand the playful way that you're using it.
I think pastiche was probably, you used it earlier, Amabel, and I think that probably is a little bit closer. It's also, it's eerily spot on in so many ways. I mean, the fact you picked 1978, which is like probably the perfect year to pick for that, especially for a box set. Like, that was the age of the box set, starting from 77. And so it just seems it's so spot on. It also, I'm wondering how it would play with the with OSR or old school, whatever you want the R to stand for, rules, revival, or Renaissance people who play earlier editions of games, because it just echoes those games so much. And they sometimes are playing games that are supposedly unplayable and then find ways to make them work. So I'm going to be curious to see if someone or a group of people, just kind of like the language group for the other game, end up coming up with rules to actually make the module work.
I mean, yeah,
or attempt to.
I'm kind of hoping for that. Like, within the module, there are references to rules and systems, and you can kind of figure out what the rules to the game are, but there are some ambiguities. Not that, because I did try once. I found it online. I tried like the Little Brown Book D&D. That is not a playable game. So the module in some ways I think could be very easily adapted to that kind of thing. I was talking to my printer about it, because he was like, is this a game? Like, who's gonna buy this? And I was like, well, different people might buy it. Now he's an old groggy guy who he's like in his I think I want to say his late 60s, and like, so he's, the idea of having like a very old D&D kind of thing for him is it was very exciting. And so I think it could do that, and I just certainly tried to evoke some of the peculiarities as I I did dig into like some old rule books, both for D&D, Tunnels and Trolls, and some other like smaller things. And I looked at a lot of zines, because there's a zine in it, and I wanted to get like zine feel right for the period. And then also kind of drawing on my own experience as a child who, I didn't know I was making zines, but I was making zines.
Well, Michael, anything else that you would like to ask right now?
I'm just trying to think through some of the questions I was thinking about earlier, and I think we've like hit on most of them in one way or another. Actually, I think thinking back to earlier, Ben, when you were saying, "Hey, quick footnote here and there," just for people who don't know, what is Hollandspiel and what kind of games do you usually publish? Because it's not always esoteric, or I mean, they can be weird games. Yes, that's true, but still, I mean, I played Oblique. It's out of print, but actually on this table right here, I'm in a wargaming club. This is not my home, so that's not my alcohol. But on this table played Infamous Traffic like years ago. But for people like, what are your, and of course dinosaurs. I know you've got I haven't played the dinosaur games, but they're a thing. So if you want to,
So Hollandspiel is a company that I started. I co-founded. It'll be 10 years in August, and it's been my full-time job for about 9 years now. And it started just publishing kind of hex and counter war games, and then we started publishing things that were a little stranger and that got more traction. And so we've done a wide variety of games. Like, we still do some historical war games. We do a lot of like smaller, more experimental games. I try to get games from new designers, and we also have several games that I guess would be political history games, not war games, but like engaging with history in a very serious way. Some of the ones that are better known is This Guilty Land, which is about the debate over slavery before the Civil War. Doubt Is Our Product, which is about the disinformation campaign of the tobacco industry and activism against that. So like serious, depressing games are what I have done a lot. And then I also do some very silly things, because if I do just serious, depressing games all the time, I'll be cranky. I don't want to be cranky. So I've done some real like goofy, weird things, and we've had so Swords Against will be our 94th numbered box game, and then we've done some non-box games, expansions and whatnot as well. So we've had like over 100 games. So yeah, we have some very serious, heavy, depressing games. We have some hex and counter war games. We have some very experimental games. Just kind of whatever takes my fancy mostly. And it's really refreshing to be able to do that for a living. Like, it shouldn't work. Like most publishers I talk to, it would not work. But partially because we do it print on demand. So we only print the number of copies that people order as they order them. So we don't have a huge warehouse full of stuff that doesn't sell. Because I've had games. I did a game called Kaiju Table Battles, which the New Yorker like followed me around when I was working on that. That didn't sell at all. New Yorker did not help at all. And if I had done like a traditional print run of that, I would have lost my house or something. So being someone who came up without a lot of money, finding a way to make games where I didn't have to take a financial risk has been like really freeing. So because of that print on demand, and because I've been very lucky in a lot of ways, I'm able to make weird games and make a living at it. And like, even if a game flops, which doesn't happen very often, they still make a profit. So like, I'm not.
Can I end with a truly obnoxious question?
Of course.
Why have board games taken off in the 21st century?
There are a whole host of reasons for that. One is board games have gotten more interesting and started to come into their own as an art form. And that's going to sound strange because, board games have been around for thousands of years, but actually using them in ways that are expressive and that are engaging is relatively new. I think because for a long time, board games were folk games, and you get some very interesting ideas with folk design, but they're not always the most polished or the most thoughtful, and then you get mass production of games being driven by printers and then toy companies, and they aren't necessarily looking for like the most satisfying games, looking for the game that sells the best, right? And that like you get a lot of plastic toy games in the 60s and 70s, and a lot of it they advertise well, and that drove sales. Once you start getting more unusual board games, and more board games that are more developed with, you know, that whole German school of game design to a degree, I think that gets a lot of more people into it, because they realize that games aren't just for kids. It's a big thing you come across again and again as board game designers. People assume that you're making things for small children. I think also just the rise of video games as a form, and TTRPGs. I think just a lot more people do some kind of gaming in their life, and so board games are a little easier to slip into. They're also shorter than a lot of things. A new video game is usually, you know, a 10-hour, 20-hour, 60-hour investment. An RPG,
infinite hours.
Yeah. Whereas like most board games, you know, you're there for an hour or two. So I think all those things together kind of feed into it. COVID, there's a huge board game sales boom in 2020 and 2021 because people are cooped up inside, need something to do with each other. Board games.
It's a thing I'm thinking about, because again, it's interesting how geek culture just exploded in the 21st century, and it seems like people want to try and find one reason, but it seems like there's 24 reasons all coming to a head at once that led to all of this happening. You know, comic book movies, tabletop role playing games, board games, World of Warcraft, all the way down the line. Anyway, now I'm rambling off. Let me ask you this. If you could play any board game tonight, Amabel, what would you play?
Oh, gosh. Put me on the spot.
All right, let me ask Michael. Michael, if you could play any role-playing game tonight, what would you play?
Running it or playing it?
Your call.
Running it, I'd probably, well, actually, I'm kind of ready for changing things up from D&D, so probably either Mothership, Frontier Scum, which I'm looking forward to, or Call of Cthulhu, although I'm really also, or Ghostbusters, which is, I think, one of the most underrated RPGs out there, and probably that system also birthed so many others after it.
Yeah, so
I've never heard of the Ghostbusters game.
Michael, tell Amabel all about the importance of the Ghostbusters RPG, because it's hugely important.
It is. Okay, so Ghostbusters. So licensed RPGs are a big thing. Some companies struggle with them. Some did really great with them. There were also some amazingly. Talk about crossover. What isn't the? There was the Dallas RPG, which was done by SPI and by Jim Dunnigan. Like, really? Jim Dunnigan designed that? Like, that is just like mind blowing. And then you've got so there was a license. So licensed RPG is like huge, and you've got to get them to the point where they're going to be breakthrough. They're going to be they're going to break through past regular RPG players, and so you've got to be able to pick them up and run and start picking it up and going fast. So they tend to be rules light, at least the ones that seem to do well. And for Ghostbusters, West End Games, who were here in New York, had the license, but they got the Call of Cthulhu folks from Chaosium to write the rules, and so they did a. They apparently started with something that was closer to Call of Cthulhu, but then they kept changing it, and they ended up with a D6 system, which is later became the same system they used for West End Games Star Wars, which still has a huge cult following, and I would say arguably possibly also may have, I don't know. I think it may have influenced a lot of what Free League does today, because some of those games like kind of came through that. But in any case,
from a mechanical perspective, you're totally right, because it was a dice pool system. It was the first dice pool system, but also the rules were kind of like in character. Like you're opening up your own role playing, your own ghost busting franchise. There was a sequel game called Ghostbusters International where you're doing it internationally, and if it's not on the Internet Archive.
Okay.
But it is a riot to play. And someone asked me, like, would you ever run D&D for people at work? I'm like, no, I would run Ghostbusters, because everyone knows the movie, everyone knows what it's about, everyone will know what to do, and the rules are like dead simple. And also there's a ghost on like the 6th, I think it is, and if it happens, then all sorts of bad things happen. So it's just fun.
So Amabel, did that buy you time to think?
Oh no, I was listening. I was listening. I was being a good guest. I was listening. I wasn't.
That's fine. Then we can. You don't need to answer the question. It's fine.
You know what? I would like to play, not because I think it will be good. I think it will be bad. But I was at a game store perusing their used game section, and I started to learn about trading card games, because I really avoided all those because I'm not made of money. But for a video that I'm researching, I needed to actually engage with collectible card games. And I came across the Tomb Raider collectible card game, and it looks atrocious. And the weirdest thing is, like, they're adapting the license. They're adapting, Lara Croft, Tomb Raider, but they're adapting the feel of a video game, and that there are levels and save points and you can reset, and it's such a weird. I feel like this happens with video game adaptations into like board game formats a lot, where they'll like adapt the levels and a lot of like the kind of interface, instead of just adapting the property. And I think that's really fascinating. Again, it does look like just an absolute misery to play, but I've been wanting to get on the table since I bought it the other day. So I guess that's my answer. It's a terrible answer, but that's what I got.
I mean, I hate to tell you that the makers of the Tomb Raider collectible card game were also the creators of Immortal: The Invisible War, the role-playing game. Famously terrible role-playing game from the 90s, riffing on like Vampire the Masquerade stuff. I had a copy for a long time. A friend under the age of 25 recently found a copy of Immortal: The Invisible War and is like, I'm going to run this. And I'm like, don't run this. It's terrible. And she's like, no. It's going to be amazing. It's so terrible. I'm like, no. It's just going to be terrible. There's nothing good here. I explored this when I was 17, so you don't have to. Like, anyway, it's just amazing that you mentioned a product that was also made by the people at Precedence, and you're also like, it's trash. All right.
Like I should probably play it before I say that, but like I can read the rules. I have eyes. I can tell.
I'll take it on faith. I'm sorry if any of the veterans of Precedence are listening to this, and that was a savage dunk that you didn't need on a Sunday night. All right, so Amabel, I'm going to definitely link to Swords Against and City of Six Moons. Michael, should I link to your blog post where you link to the National Archives?
Sure, go for it.
Yeah, and anything else that you'd want me to link to in this?
No, I think that would be about it. Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been. I'm never sure how these things were going to go. I was a little less certain how this would go than usual, though, Amabel, just because you're a board gamer. But this went really, really well.
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, this was really enjoyable. Like it was great mixing it up. Come back anytime. Michael, thank you for suggesting this. It was a ton of fun.
Sure. All right. Awesome.
And with that, I will say to the audience, have a happy Sunday, and to you two, have a happy weekend.
All right. Sounds good. You too. Have a great weekend.